So let me ask you the first question. What are the psychological and social effects of victims of sex trafficking?
I'll start with the psychological effects. The psychological effects are similar, really, in a lot of ways to all victims of trauma, meaning that all victims of trauma can potentially have depression, anxiety, PTSD, things like that. However, for victims of trafficking, um, they tend to show more fear of being controlled and of being trapped. That's something unique to victims of trafficking. They also tend to have a lot of anger and distrust, which is understandable. And they also have a lot of self blame and low self worth, things like that. As far as social effects, those feelings that they tend to have of shame and of guilt, maybe low self worth, those can lead those victims to be isolated from their families and from their friends. So one of the social effects is isolation from family and friends. And then our clients, I've noticed, tend to, after we talk to them, they tend to feel really apart from people and from society and from the community. They feel that no one really can understand them or what they went through. And so they have some difficulty integrating into sort of normal life, a normal routine, such as finding work or going back to school, making friends, things like that.
Okay, thank you. And how are they forced into this life?
How do they get forced into this lifestyle? So it's important to make the distinction between foreign-born victims and then domestic victims because the reasons are different. As far as domestic victims, usually what we found, at least here at Mosaic, that the biggest reason is abuse in the home. So in that case, leaving almost seems like the better option for those victims. So I guess you could sort of summarize it as runaways with a history of abuse by their parents or abuse in the home. And those are the scenarios that you hear about that really involve situations with pimps and underage prostitution and things like that. There's this promise of a better life. As far as foreign-born victims, the biggest thing for them is debt bondage. So what happens is somebody promises them a job in another country, let's just say the U.S., and so they're told they're going to have a job that's going to allow them to support their family in their home country, a job such as waitress or working in a massage parlor, but not for not sexual work or anything like that. So what happens is they come over and then they're enslaved basically because they have to pay back the fees for the trip. They have to pay for their lodging, for their food, for all kinds of things. So they're sort of in a debt bondage situation, like I mentioned. Then there's the shame element. They're too ashamed to leave the situation, to go back to their families to talk about what happened. And then the most common thing is that they're threatened by the trafficker, and they're told that if they say something, if they speak up, if they go back to their families or they tell their families what happened, that their family is going to be hurt, or that somebody in their family will be killed. So all of those elements are going to, of course, lead to fear and cooperation.